Greetings, everyone. This is the 29th series, Good Intentions Are Inevitably Punished, from the Logic of Sense. Taken at face value, this chapter appears to be a big downer. However, Deleuze, I believe, is playing with the reader quite a bit, even being a little deceptive at times. But it's a deception that's easily discovered if one follows the references he gives in the footnotes. So he's still talking about the dynamic genesis, how the emerging human being, the infant, learns the process of language, learns how to use language, or in this case, learns thought, how the emerging human being starts to think. And this series follows immediately in from the last series. He ended talking about Oedipus and the Oedipus complex, and he begins this series, and most of the series is about Oedipus and the Oedipus complex. Like he did in the end of the last series, he compares Oedipus to Hercules, the hero of the surface. So the good intentions are Oedipus's intentions to create the surface, to bring up the image of the mother from the depths and the father who is on the heights, to evoke the father, to bring him down, to bring them both to the surface, to create a surface. The reason that these intentions are inevitably punished is because the surface is extremely fragile, easily collapsible, delicate. So the surface has decisive importance in the development of the ego. The formation of the surface equals the formation of the ego. And the real test of the ego, Deleuze says, is a problem of coordination, of bringing things up from the depths, bringing things down from the heights to create this surface where the ego functions. So the reason the surface is so fragile is because these destructive drives from the depths always threaten to rise up and take over, or the way Deleuze puts it is that the image of the phallus is threatened to be overtaken by the bad penis of the depths or by the good penis of the heights. He talks about the surface as the image of the phallus, whereas in the depths it's the bad penis and the heights it's the good penis. So it's important to try to get behind some of this psychological lingo to understand what is being talked about. The image of the phallus is vitality, consciousness, the life force. There's certain Hindu sects that worship something they call the Shiva Lingam. Lingam is a Sanskrit word for phallus. And it's this thing is like a big rock in the shape of a phallus. And they're not worshiping a penis, they're worshiping the vitality, the life force that is symbolized by the erect penis, as opposed to the flaccid penis, which does not have the same life force. So when he says the image of the phallus, he's talking about life force or consciousness or perhaps sense. The way that Deleuze is, in my opinion, being a little deceptive is because he's using language that implies certainty, that something is definitely going to happen in a particular way. Good intentions are inevitably punished, and they're always punished. There's no other hope for it. In the very last sentence of this series, he writes, and it's in quotes, "For of course, all life is a process of demolition." And I have no idea who he's quoting. He doesn't cite it. I tried looking it up, no clue. But he's giving all these sort of grim prospects. He writes, The surface has a decisive importance in the development of the ego, as Freud clearly demonstrated when he said that the perception consciousness system is localized on the membrane formed at the surface of the protoplasmic vesicle. So a vesicle is a sac-like thing that contains either a liquid or a gas. And the way Deleuze words this, it's as if this vesicle is a material thing having to do with the body. So Deleuze cites this from Freud's Beyond the Pleasure Principle, chapter 4. And in the footnote, he writes, this entire chapter is essential to the biopsychic theory of surfaces. So if we read chapter 4 from Beyond the Pleasure Principle, which I'll link to below, we can see that this vesicle isn't a material thing. It's Freud is using it as a metaphor, as a model, and the vesicle, it's modeling the human body. And Deleuze relates this vesicle model to his model of the body without organs. So the surface that Freud is examining is the surface between the outer world, the external, and the inner world. And the vesicle is the body that separates these two. Now, Deleuze spoke with so much certainty, but Freud starts this chapter by saying that this is speculation. He's speculating, and sometimes it's even far-fetched speculation. So rather than being completely certain, it's obviously not. And Deleuze acknowledges this with the very last phrase in this series, which is including speculative life. So this whole series, everything he says about the Oedipus complex is speculation, is kind of what he's saying. And it's important to note this whole series is about Oedipus, the Oedipus complex. The very next major work of Deleuze's, his next major book with Felix Guattari, will be Anti-Oedipus. But it seems like he's not certain about the conventional way that the Oedipus complex is presented. Deleuze says the ideal Oedipus complex is the one of good intentions, where Oedipus is bringing up the image of the mother from the depths and the image of the father from the heights to create this surface, this ego at the surface, taking the things from the id below and from the superego above to make the ego a functioning ego. So Freud even acknowledges the uncertainty in his speculation in this chapter from Beyond the Pleasure Principle. And I'll just read a little quote from that. He says that the indefinite nature of all the discussions that we term metapsychological naturally comes from the fact that we know nothing about the nature of the excitation process in the element of psychic systems, and do not feel justified in making any assumption about it. Thus, we are all the time operating with a large X, meaning uncertainty, which we carry over into every new formula. This is how Deleuze is playing with the reader. He's presenting something as if certain, but behind it, it's really speculation. This is a story being told, and he even clues us to the fact that this is just a story being told with the very first sentence in this series, in which he says that it is necessary, therefore, to imagine Oedipus not only as innocent, but as full of zeal and good intentions. So he starts the series by saying we are imagining Oedipus in this way. Again, he's kind of, I would say he's hedging his bets. He's saying this how it might be, or it's just a story being told. So in one part of this series, Deleuze will look at the word intention. He'll say that it is with the Oedipus complex where the intention, which he calls the moral notion par excellence, is born. He calls intention an ethical category, and it is of considerable positive importance in the development of the surface. Intention has to do with this coordination of the surface. And again, we have multiple meanings of surface in this chapter. The surface that I just talked about with Freud is the surface between the inner and the outer. Deleuze talks about the metaphysical surface, which is how he uses the word surface in most of the rest of the book, which is the frontier between metaphysics, between language, between ideas, and between bodies and the mixtures of bodies, or between things and ideas. That's another surface. But with this distinguishing of intention as the coordination of the surface, there's also the surface between conscious action and unconscious action. So intention is willed action, but along with willed action is also accomplished action. So not every intention follows. You have an intention to do something, but sometimes the action is contrary to the intention. Another psychological Freudian jingo word that he uses is castration. And so this castration refers to cutting off the image of the phallus, to the destructive aspect. This is how the surface can collapse. That's what he calls castration, the collapse of this surface. And he'll say that this phallic line that traces the surface is also a trace of the castration, that it is a crack. It can refer to the earlier series on the crack. So basically what he is saying is that the energy, this phallic image has come because the superego has freed the libido, the libidinal drives from the depths, has freed it from the drives of the depths and brought it to the surface. And then Deleuze will say that there's another process that Freud theorized called desexualization. And so these libidinal drives are brought to the surface and then get desexualized. And Deleuze relates this to Freud's idea of the death drive, which is the a drive of destruction, to pull things apart, to destroy things. And he'll refer the reader to chapter 4 of The Id and the Ego by Freud. Deleuze is going to say this desexualized energy is comparable to sublimation, to taking this energy and putting it towards something else. Also symbolization, which is from Lacan, a concept from Lacan, that when the ego enters into the symbolic order, the symbolic world, that's the world of language. That's where, thought comes about. So this desexualized energy is relevant to how the emerging human starts to think and have thought. Deleuze also looks at the word image. He capitalizes it. He says we have first of all, the image of these partial zones, which were called erogenous zones in the previous series. And then we have the image of the phallus, which is projected onto the genitals of either the little boy or little girl. It's that energy, that life force. And then we have the image of the mother, the image of the parents, the image of the mother from the depths, the father from on high. But eventually this image relates to action. And it doesn't matter if it's the intentional action, the willed action, or if it's the accomplished action. It's whatever happens, and whatever happens on the surface, whatever is able to stay on the surface, not get consumed by the depths or sucked up into the heights. And this action, which represents all actions, he said, is the pure event, just the event, whether willed or not, whether conscious or unconscious. The esoteric aspect of this series has to do with intention. Intention is willed action. It's said that every intentional act is a magical act. And with that, we'll see you for the next series on the phantasm.